He's got a voice like solid gold and a twinkle in his eye. And keeping that eye firmly placed on our parliamentarian buddies is Tony Amos. We welcome Tony and the weekly political roundup.
Tony Amos. Good to see you, Tony.
Good to see you too, Jared Smith. Good to see you and good to see you.
Right in the depth of winter.
Yes, Jared. Chilly, as cold as a mother-in-law's kiss. That's cold. It's a bit chilly, isn't it, eh?
Yeah, but
it's a little chillish.
But it's not too cold to have a bit of a buzz.
Oh, the buzz. Jared, the buzz this week. It's been suggested, that wanting to become a Member of Parliament should automatically disqualify you. That's the buzz.
Oh, brilliant buzz there, Tony. And it's time for your favourite subject, politics.
Oh, yes, our weekly walk down the global gutter of life. Our look at the oddballs and misfits, the sooks and the crooks, the rooters and looters of public office we proudly call our politicians.
And we always follow up with what are they up to this week, Tony?
Well, they're up to more of the same, much of the same, but of course there's been a couple of shots across the bow of the good ship government. And one of those shots has come from an unlikely fellow who's become a new Kiwi hero. I'm talking about Mr. Kim.com.
I like him.
And I think most people do, Jared. I mean, we've spoke highly of this man on the program before. He doesn't appear to have done anything wrong. And as soon as the American government started to pick on him officially, that was reinforced. We knew then that he hadn't done anything wrong, because that's usually how it works. The Americans said this was going to be the biggest copyright case in the history of the world. Of course, they got Shonky Jonkey's government and his police department to go and raid the .com mansion, as it's been known. And of course, we all know the story. But what's happened now? Well, last week, in a New Zealand court, it was decided that the raid was illegal. It's funny, isn't it? These people stand there and say, we are here to fight crime, to be right. And what are they doing? They're bigger criminals, and they're wrong. They're the American government, and our justice system too has now been tainted by that same unsavoury activity.
Did you think at the time, Tony, and I thought at the time, this doesn't seem right. There's something not ringing a bell here. The way they swept in, confiscated everything he owned, and they would had trailers take it just seemed
we Kiwis, our gut feel, our instincts are usually right on this sort of stuff, and we were right, and that's why Kiwis have now come in behind this man, because he, in spite of him being a big successful multi-millionaire, he's become the underdog through this process, and Kiwis will always go into bat for an underdog, and that's what's happened. And remember John Memory Banks, the one MP for the Sad Act Party, the MP for Epsom, the man whose disgraceful behaviour following those encounters was broadcast to us all. Well, he'll go down too as being the odd job dickhead around all this stuff too.
Now, Tony, every Prime Minister has a wish list.
A wish list.
How's our leaders?
Well, our Prime Minister has a wish list too. Shonky Jonkey has a wish list. A few weeks ago he went off to London to visit the Queen, like a good little Prime Minister. And on the way back, he told the nation on the way back, he made a wee note. He made on the plane on the way home. This is how deep and philosophical and strong and well planned and visionary this government is. He made a wee note. Probably on the back of a fag packet. Anyway, he made the wish list. And what's his wish list? Well, he hasn't showed it to us. He's told a wee bit about us, but I guess it includes closing down TV and Z7. I guess that's part of his wish list. I guess slowing down the Christchurch rebuild is part of his wish list. I guess mucking up the education process is part of his wish list. Putting the boot into the beneficiaries, part of his wish list, and reshuffling the Accident Compensation Corporation, or is that the Accident Compensation Constipation? But of course the number one priority on Shonky's wish list is getting his knighthood. And of course that's why he scurried off to London to visit the Queen. But this same man keeps telling us he has a mandate for asset sales. A mandate for asset sales. One vote. Last week in Parliament, the legislation was rushed through, squeezed through, one dodgy vote. And that came from Peter Dunn, who wasn't even there. He couldn't face the consequences. He couldn't face the ridicule. This is a bloke who represents 0.06% of the electorate, and yet his one vote has allowed this asset-stripping government to steal the assets from our citizens and put it on the market. And of course, Tony Ryle, the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, he was vocal too last week saying, I've got a mandate. Because we know that Tony Ryle's got a mandate because it's his boyfriend. One day we just might find out a bit more about this brokeback government.
Bit of action overseas too, Tony. Let's have a look at the international scene.
The big story right now is Syria, where the Syrian government is at war with its own people. Now, we've seen this happen before, but in what to be the old Yugoslavia. Remember that back in the 90s? That happened there. What did the world do then? Absolutely nothing. People were slaughtered by the thousands, and the world stood and watched. We saw it from our living rooms, on the television, on the news, you know. And what's happening in Syria now, the same thing. And who's getting involved? No one. The United Nations have been there. For goodness sake, Kofi Annan's been there and come up with a peace plan. Ban Ki-moon says it's going to work. They're a couple of duffers. NATO doing nothing. Nobody wants to do anything at all except watch and wonder, like the rest of us. What's the United Nations about? I tell you what, I've said it before, the United Nations is well past its use-by date and only exists now to perpetuate itself and the few people in charge at the top. It's revolting when you think about it.
But not as much as our fearless band, the List MP.
But there's always a good story, and this particular story is about the Prime Minister and his favourite List MP out in the Prime Ministerial limousine one day. They were cruising down the street one day and there was a little girl at the side of the road with a stall selling kittens. And the Prime Minister and his favourite List MP were both a bit, "Oh, stop," he said to the driver. Driver obeyed. They backed up. The Prime Minister and his favourite List MP got out and walked across to the wee girl with the kittens, and he said, "Hello, do you know who I am?" And she said, "Oh, I think so." He said, "Tell me about your kittens." She said, "They are for sale." He said, "Oh, that's wonderful. You're raising some pocket money." She said, "Yes." He said, "I like kittens." He said, "I wonder if they like politicians. Who do you think your kittens would vote for?" And she looked up and batted her eyelids and she said, "Oh, they'd vote National." Well, the Prime Minister was ecstatic. He ran back to his car and he grabbed his press secretary and he said, "Look, we've got to come back tomorrow. We're going to come here with all the television crews, with all the journos. We're going to revisit that Uyghur with the kittens and get the best publicity we can get, because children and kittens can just warm the hearts of all the voters." Good idea.
Oh, yeah.
The next day, the Prime Minister's limo's back with the Prime Minister and his favourite List MP, who was along for the ride, as per usual. And there's all the press, all the television crews there, the trucks, the cameras, the lights. And the Prime Minister walked over to the wee girl and he said, "How are you today?" She said, "I'm good, thank you, sir." And he said, "How are your kittens today?" She said, "They're good too, thank you, sir." And he said, "Now tell me, how would your kittens vote?" And she said, "Well, these kittens would vote Labour." And he was shocked. Oh, Prime Minister was stunned, his eyes watered. He said, "Labour?" He said, "But I was here yesterday and you said they'd vote National." And the wee girl looked up and said, "Yes, that was yesterday, but today they've got their eyes open." And that's politics.